Thank you everyone for coming to our inaugural SkunkSpeak event. I'm the president of SCONC. My name is Alyssa LaFaro. I'm a research communicator at UNC Chapel Hill. The brainchild for this was really that we wanted to offer our members more while simultaneously giving our members opportunities to talk to the membership. And so I'm so thrilled to have our first speaker here today, who is not only an incredible science communicator, but a longtime friend and colleague. I actually began working with Marley at UNC Research over 10 years ago and was so sad when she left us to pursue freelance. But she left for a very good reason. She left to go to Antarctica. So I don't know what a better reason to leave a job is. That's a pretty good one. So Marley Parker is a professional photographer, videographer, science writer, and ocean explorer. After earning a bachelor's degree in journalism from UNC Chapel Hill, Marley spent the early years of her career producing stories for UNC Research. In 2018, she left the university to start her own business as an independent science communicator. Since then, she's joined over 30 major ocean expeditions, documenting research for organizations like the National Science Foundation, NASA, the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, the Ocean Exploration Trust, and many others. When she's not at sea, Marley often visits classrooms, hosts workshops, and presents her work to various audiences. She is an instructor for the Center for Collaborative Education and the director of mentorship for the Association of Science Communicators. Please welcome Marley Parker.
Thank you, Alyssa, and thank you all so much for coming out. I'm really, really thrilled to be here. I have a ton of stuff that I want to try to show y'all in a short amount of time, so I'm just going to go ahead and dive right in and see if the computer will work. So I want to start off by sharing just a little bit about where I was and what I was doing for work just a few months ago. This is a photo I took of the Ellsworth mountain range, which is located in the interior of Western Antarctica. I flew down here with a team of scientists and engineers, and we landed at a place called Union Glacier Base Camp, roughly 600 miles from the South Pole. We spent a few days at this base camp, and then we trekked out to the Ronnie Ice Shelf, where we spent 2 weeks living and working in this tiny field camp in the middle of this giant ice shelf. It was unlike anything I've ever done before. We were living in tents directly on the ice. This was my tent that I shared with another person. I shared this tent with the only other woman on the team. We had about 15 people on the team, 2 women, including myself. So this was our tent. Pretty small, tight quarters, absolutely no personal space, no privacy. But the science we were doing down there was really phenomenal. So we were working with a team of engineers from the NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory and scientists from Caltech who were installing these seismic arrays to better understand and monitor how this ice shelf is shifting, how it's melting, and how that is contributing to sea level rise and global climate change. So really, really important and very fascinating work, but also pretty challenging environment to work in, as you might imagine. Challenge number 1, just keeping electronic equipment warm enough to function when you're out in very, very cold temperatures. Laptops, cameras, batteries, everything got pretty cold pretty quickly. So that was one challenge. And then simply having to shovel our way through base camp, shoveling tents out of the snow, shoveling, that was a regular chore. And then one of the most challenging things I found was the 24-hour daylight. So in November, December, January, in the interior of Antarctica, the sun never sets at all. It just circled around us every day. So this is a photo I took at 1 o'clock in the morning. Beautiful photo, beautiful sunburst photo. This is kind of the Instagram version of the experience. This is the real behind the scenes experience. So When you're dealing with extreme intense solar radiation like this, sunburn is inevitable. Y'all, I reapplied sunscreen like 5, 6, 7 times a day. And you can see I still have sunburn on my face. This is me in my tent with my Kindle getting ready to go to bed. And I'm like, wow, I'm still sunburned. It wasn't until we had been down there for a week that someone told me, oh, yeah, you need to be putting on sunscreen when you go to sleep because the UV rays are penetrating through the walls of the tent and still burn you at night. I put my face cream on. No, I needed to put sunscreen on literally 24 hours a day. And then this really attractive photo is me waking up first thing in the morning after sleeping through the night. And, I had on the big face mask and all of that, but it's still just very disorienting and very challenging to try to get actual sleep when it is very, very bright out all the time. So that was yet another challenge. And then, of course, just the weather itself. It didn't actually snow while we were down there. This is a very dry part of Antarctica, but the wind does blow the snow around and will create different snow drifts. So this is a really pretty kind of cinematic shot that I got. This is actually a slow motion shot that I filmed just because it was very beautiful to see how the snow was moving. This is what it actually looked and sounded like. So again, pretty challenging environments. But we did get really lucky. The weather gods were benevolent, and we had several days while we were there where the sun was shining. It was very calm and clear. There was almost no wind. And so on those days, I was able to fly my drone. And this is just a very short video, quick compilation of some of the drone footage I was able to film while we were down there. All right, so I wanted to share just a little bit about that experience for 2 reasons. The first is it's just a really cool example of what my work can look like as a science communicator and a science communicator that specializes in documenting research expeditions in very remote parts of the planet. This is just a really, really cool example. The other reason I wanted to share this is it's a good story. And that's really the foundation of what I do as a science communicator is tell compelling stories about research and science and engineering happening in these very far-flung parts of the planet. And obviously, many people here are professional science communicators. I don't need to dissect the importance of storytelling, but I do really love this quote from Randy Olson. And if any of you haven't read Don't Be Such a Scientist, I highly recommend it. It's a fantastic, very funny, very compelling book. And I think Randy really hits the nail on the head here, that first-person narrative is truly one of the most powerful tools we have for creating connections and for sharing knowledge and just generating empathy and understanding. And that is basically what I'm going to do today is share my first person story of my life and career over the past 15 or 20 years and try to briefly and cohesively tell you how I went from being a recent college graduate that didn't have a job to now traveling the world and doing some of the most incredible work that I never could have imagined 20 years ago. So we'll go ahead and kick it off. We're going to go back in time to the glory days, UNC Chapel Hill, go Tar Heels. I was at Carolina at the best time. I was there from 2006 to 2009. We won the championship in 2009. Barack Obama was president. It was just a much much happier, more beautiful time. Really great time to be at Carolina. So I partied a lot in college. I had a great time. I also took my studies seriously. I specifically wanted to go to UNC for the School of Journalism. So I was very, very happy to be in that program. And while I was at the J School, I tried to take advantage of lots of different opportunities. I was also minoring in Spanish, very, very useful. So I got to do these documentary projects in Mexico and Ecuador and get some really solid hands-on real world experience. But even with all of that, and even graduating from a school like UNC with a good degree and good experience, I still did not have a job when I graduated. So I had to really piece it together. I mean, it was 2010, it was a recession. It was a really tough time to be finding a job in like magazines or newspapers, which is what a lot of recent J school graduates do. So I had to piece it together with part-time jobs. I had an unpaid internship. It was not very glamorous, but I did eventually get a paid position working at UNC, working for the College of Arts and Sciences. And this was like a paid internship, but it allowed me to use some of the skills that I had developed at the journalism school, taking photos, filming videos. This was 2011, so YouTube was still a relatively new thing. I think the college had just started their YouTube channel and they wanted me to, produce short videos about events and things happening for their YouTube channel. So that was a good foot in the door, really good experience. I really enjoyed working with Kim Spur and Dee Reed. It was a great first real job. And then about a year and a half later, I found out about a position opening up at the Office of Research Communications at UNC. And I applied. I didn't at this point have any actual science communication experience. They hired me specifically because I had the video skill sets. And then I had to kind of learn on the job how to interview scientists and how to tell stories about science, which is exactly what I did. I got to go all across UNC's campus, interview different researchers, take photos of them. If they were doing something visual, I might film a video about it, but really learned on the job how to tell science stories. And not only did I get to go across campus, I got to go across the state. This is in Morehead City, directly behind the UNC Institute of Marine Sciences. Really beautiful place to work. At the time, Carrie Irish was the director of communications at IMS, and she was always dreaming up different assignments and different projects that I could film or photograph down there. It's a very visual place. So some days I was going out in the marsh and photographing marine researchers working there. Some days going out on boats. This is the RV Capricorn, and just doing all kinds of cool marine science, working with fish, sea turtles, documenting one of the longest running shark surveys in the country. And I figured out pretty quickly that I do well with working on boats. I don't get seasick very easily. I like being on the water. I like being out in the sun, lots of sunscreen. And I really, really enjoyed this part of my job. I thought this is about as cool as it gets, getting paid to go to the beach, go out on boats, take photos and work with marine scientists. Well, about 2 years after I'd started at the Office of Research Communications, this guy, Jonathan Lees, at the time was the chair of the Geological Sciences Department at UNC. And he came to our office and said, I'm leading a research expedition in southern Chile. And I'm taking a team of geophysicists to install seismometers all over one of the most active volcanoes in South America. And I'm looking for a photographer and a videographer, someone who can film, take photos, and if they speak Spanish, that would be helpful, to come with us to document the expedition. This was completely outside of my wheelhouse. I'd never done anything like this. It was a far cry from going out with researchers on a boat for a day. But I said, yes, please, absolutely, I will do that. And my boss was amazing. She let me spend the better part of 2 weeks in southern Chile working on the Yaima volcano. So this is a 10,000-foot stratovolcano, and again, one of the most active in South America. And it was just an incredible experience, spending all day, every day, filming and photographing these geophysicists as they worked on different parts of the volcano. It really looked like something out of Jurassic Park. It was just a completely wild environment. It was also pretty grueling and pretty challenging. I mean, we had 10, sometimes 12, 14-hour days hiking up and down an ash-covered, snow-covered volcano. And again, I had never done anything like this before. So there were days where I was not prepared. I didn't bring the right clothing. I didn't bring enough water one day. I just, was kind of out of my element. But I loved it. I loved how challenging it was. I loved just being out in this really rugged environment, doing this really, really cool science with this hardworking team. Towards the end of the expedition, the leadership of the team was trying to decide who was going to go to the summit of the volcano. And it was quickly decided that I would not be joining the summit team because I did not have the proper experience and mountaineering training to do that, which was a big bummer. In hindsight, that makes complete sense. I had no idea what I was doing. But I was really, really, kind of bummed and disappointed. I'd had such a good time. I really wanted to go to the summit of this mountain, and I was not able to do that. So I came back to North Carolina, and as soon as I got home, I set some new goals for myself. I decided there and then that I was going to do whatever it took to become as qualified and as experienced as possible to be able to join expeditions in remote environments. So that looked like a couple different things. First off, I just started spending a lot more time in the outdoors in wild places. This is Western North Carolina near Mount Mitchell, just doing lots of hard hikes with my camera. I also learned how to fly drones. That was a piece of advice I got from one of the marine scientists that I worked with on the coast. He said, if you want to do more field work, if you want to work in remote environments with research teams, you should learn how to fly drones. So I got my FAA 107 license. And then I also got certified to scuba dive. This was something that had kind of been on my bucket list and been on my radar because I'd been working with marine scientists on the coast of North Carolina. It wasn't until I got back from Chile and had that big kind of perspective shifting experience that I made it a point to do this. And then I also took a mountaineering course out in the Cascades and climbed a couple of snow-covered volcanoes in Oregon and Washington. And that was very empowering, very fulfilling. So I did all of these things over the course of about 2 years. This sort of experience and training doesn't happen overnight. But as I was doing all these things, my boss at UNC, Layla Dowdy, and my colleagues at UNC really started to notice that I was putting in all of this work and all of this energy to be able to document research in more wild places. And it really paid off. They started sending me to more wild places. So in the summer of 2017, I got to go to the Galapagos. I'm sure many of you are familiar with UNC's Galapagos Science Center. So I got to work with a couple different research teams down there, got to utilize my new underwater photography skills, and then did several other projects similar to that. I got to join a team of UNC marine scientists working in Belize. They were doing this really amazing coral reef conservation project where they would take coral fragments and transplant them. And there are several other examples, but these are just two. So again, as all of these things were happening, as I was going to all these places and producing these really beautiful stories for UNC research, people outside of UNC were starting to notice my work, including Dave Johnston. He is married to Carrie Irish, and Dave had seen my work. He knew that I did really well working on boats and working in these remote places. And so he approached me in 2017 and said, hey, Marley, how do you feel about maybe joining our expedition in Antarctica, where we would be studying whales for the better part of 2 months? Obviously, that's a jaw-dropping, once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, but it came with a big catch. In order to join this major research expedition in Antarctica, this was completely outside of my job at UNC. So I could not take 2 months off of work. In order to join this expedition, I would have to quit my job. A job I loved, a job that allowed me to travel, that had a salary, health insurance, 401k, every benefit you could want as a North Carolina state employee. Do I give all of that up just to go on this one expedition to Antarctica? Yes. I quit my job. I immediately became a full-time freelance photographer, videographer. And I went to Antarctica and spent 6 weeks living and working aboard Prince M. Gould, which at the time was one of 2 full-time research vessels dedicated to bringing American science teams to Antarctica. And we were studying humpback whales and minke whales. So this looked like jumping in these little Zodiac boats every day and going out to tag these whales. We were using little suction cup tags. They didn't harm the animals. They would just stick to them for 12 to 24 hours, then release, float up to the surface, and we would collect them and collect the data off of them. Antarctica is, again, just a phenomenal place. You never know what you're going to get. Some days it's just crystal clear, perfectly picturesque calm like this. And then some days you have 70-knot winds blowing hurricane force winds. Some days you sail through the Weddell Sea. This is where Ernest Shackleton's ship, the Endurance, got stuck and sank. When we sailed through it at the third week of February, it looked like this. And when we came back to this exact same spot 2 weeks later, it looked like this, just fully iced over. So we were in an A1 class 1 icebreaker, and we still got stuck. Our ship got completely stuck in the ice for 4 days, which by Antarctica standards is not even that bad. People have been stuck in the ice down there for like 3 or 4 weeks. So it's all about perspective. But I loved it. It was a very challenging but very affirming trip, and I knew that I wanted to keep doing this kind of work. But again, opportunities to go to Antarctica don't pop up every single day. So when I got back to North Carolina, 2 months later, I was invited to, well, actually this invitation happened right before I left for Antarctica, but I got connected with the WHOI Ocean Institute. So 2 months after I got back from Antarctica, I flew out to San Diego and boarded this vessel, which was Schmidt's original research vessel called the Falkor. And similar to Antarctica, we had some wild weather. This was going through the outer bands of a hurricane. Even just the outer bands can create massive waves. Again, we saw some really amazing charismatic megafauna, dolphins and whales. But on this trip, we were not studying marine mammals or even marine biology of any kind. We were using brand new novel oceanographic tech and tools. These torpedo-looking things are called AUVs, or autonomous underwater vehicles. You can see me here in the corner, documenting everything that's happening. And again, I just really loved being a part of a team like this. This is a photo I took at midnight in the control room. You can really feel just the energy, the intensity of how hard everyone is working, really mission driven and focused. It's a really incredible environment to work in. So I ended up doing 3 expeditions with the Schmidt Ocean Institute during 2018. And towards the end of 2018, those 3 expeditions combined with my time in Antarctica, I'd done over 100 days at sea in my first year of being a freelance ocean photographer and videographer. So I said, all right, let me see if I can keep going and keep making this happen. I knew that I needed to expand my professional network. I couldn't just rely on one organization to hire me for these expeditions. So I went to this conference in Boston called All Hands on Deck. And at this conference, I specifically made it a point to introduce myself to the folks who run the Ocean Exploration Trust and a ship called Nautilus. So this is Samantha Wishnack and Allison Fundus, part of the phenomenal female leadership at this organization. I talked to them for just a few minutes, and I somehow made a good first impression because they hired me the following summer to work on their ship in the middle of the Pacific. This is where Samoa is located. So I flew to Samoa via New Zealand and boarded this vessel, EV Nautilus. And we sailed from Samoa across the international date line and the equator up to Honolulu, Hawaii. And along the way, we were deploying our ROV. This is what the Nautilus ship is most well known for. ROV stands for remotely operated vehicle. So this is not a human occupied thing. This is a very sophisticated robot that is taking cameras and sensors and all kinds of instrumentation down to the seafloor. Meanwhile, all of the humans stay on board the ship and we see everything that the ROV is seeing from our control room. My job on this particular expedition was really cool because I got to operate the cameras on the ROV. So I was filming the ocean floor. It was absolutely incredible and unlike anything else I had ever done. You know, at this point, I'd been to Antarctica. This experience was even cooler than Antarctica. It was so mind-blowing. So here is the first thing that I ever filmed on the ocean floor.
This is one of those moments where people are like, what do you do for a
And you
living?
can hear
What
the
is your job?"
chitter chatter in the background is all my
Oh.
shipmates
Oh, we're
freaking
going all the
out
way back.
about
This
this
is so cool.
beautiful Iridogorgia coral.
Oh, profile
This
is
is a
stunning.
sea coral that grows, I think between 8
Love
and
seeing
10,000
the
feet
like the
deep.
axis and how
Yeah.
it's like
So I got to
all
like
those
zoom in
balls.
and do the
Yeah,
focus
no,
and
Yeah,
do
the
all of
details on
the
that
camera work
axis
on
is
this.
pretty neat.
So we're now at the end of 2019. I've done about 6 expeditions altogether. I, again, knew that I wanted to keep doing this work, knew that I needed to keep meeting people, keep getting more integrated into the ocean science world. And one of the organizations that I'd heard about repeatedly is the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution. They are the oldest and one of the most highly esteemed ocean science institutions in the world. So I went to the Ocean Sciences meeting in San Diego, which is massive. It's like AGU, huge, huge conference. And I made it a point to introduce myself to this guy. Ken Costell is the director of research communications at Woods Hole. So I'd heard a lot about Woods Hole from some of my shipmates on other vessels. And I'd heard that obviously it's a very, very highly esteemed scientific institution, and it's also very, very hard to work for them. And some of my shipmates had told me, yeah, Woods Hole's not going to hire you. It's an old boys club. If you don't know somebody, you're not going to get hired. So when I introduced myself to Ken, I said, hey, Ken, I'd really like to work for you. And I've heard that that's not going to happen. And I was very bold and very blunt. And I said, you know, I really think you should hire me. And I really don't think there should be this gatekeeping around it. And Ken took my card and was like, I don't think that's necessarily true. You know, maybe at some point we could hire you. Whatever. I had no idea if he was actually going to email me or not. I also had no idea that the whole world was about to implode from COVID. I had lined up more expedition work with the Schmidt Ocean Institute for the summer of 2020. I was supposed to do back-to-back expeditions on the Great Barrier Reef. I think we all had really amazing plans. 20, right? Obviously, that did not happen. COVID just basically canceled every expedition or indefinitely postponed every expedition, every fieldwork opportunity that I had planned for that year. So now what? I'm, you know, stuck at home in Chapel Hill, and suddenly all my work is canceled, and I'm a full-time freelancer. So I pivoted to doing content related to COVID. And fortunately, I was still in contact with my old colleagues at UNC. And I did quite a bit of work for TRAX and for the School of Medicine at UNC. School of Medicine paid me a lot of money to make a 1-minute video about how to do a self-administered COVID test. Not exactly sexy, deep sea science adventure, but you know, it paid the bills during a very volatile, tumultuous time, and I was very happy to have the work. And then eventually in late 2020 in the fall, I was able to go back out to sea after completing a 2-week quarantine. So I was paid to go sit in a hotel room in Seattle for 2 weeks straight and complete this quarantine. And then even once we were able to, you know, test negative for COVID, board the ship, we still had to wear masks. We had very, very strict COVID protocols. But I was just happy to be able to get on the ship again, to go out and do ocean science, even in the midst of a pandemic. I did get really tired of photographing people wearing masks. I feel like so much expression is lost. But, you know, I was still making it work to do the full-time freelance ocean science niche thing. But when I got back from the expeditions I did at the end of 2020, going into the beginning of 2021, we all remember COVID was still raging. We didn't have vaccines yet. Things were still really unpredictable, really scary. You know, traveling was just such a bizarre, hard thing to do. You know, it's just a lot of doom and gloom and like, is this ever going to get better? And I started thinking, is this really feasible for me to continue to be a freelancer and to continue to try to do this? So I ended up applying for a job at NC State, and their research department had a job opening that was very similar to what I had done at UNC. Long story short, I got an interview. They liked me. They offered me the job. And fate has a funny way of intervening in our lives, because the same day that NC State offered me this research communications job, Woods Hole finally called. Ken Costell called me up and said, hey, are you interested in doing an expedition with us off the coast of Spain in the North Atlantic? You'll have to do a 2-week quarantine in a hotel room in Spain and then join this crazy expedition in the North Atlantic. And I said, yes, absolutely. I politely declined the job offer from NC State and then did this quarantine in Vigo, Spain, and then eventually boarded this vessel. Sarmiento de Gamboa is a Spanish research vessel working with a team of incredible scientists and engineers from Woods Hole. So we were doing a lot of different things on this expedition, but one of the most visual things we were doing was pulling up these really wild-looking creatures from the ocean twilight zone. So this is where the aliens live in the ocean. You've got the surface waters, then you've got like the deep abyss, and then we've got the mid layer, which is what we call the mesopelagic zone or the twilight zone. We call it where the weird things are. So this is a hatchetfish. This is a heteropod. This is an Atolla jellyfish. We were just studying all these different specimens. This is one of the most mysterious portions of the ocean. The most challenging thing about this expedition, we had a lot of really rough weather, and the ship we were working on, the Spanish research vessel, was one of the most unstable platforms I've ever been on. So this is drone from how calm the water is. Look at the ship behind us. This is flat calm. Can you imagine what it was like in a storm? It was terrible. I do not recommend this vessel. So I wouldn't get on this again. However, Woods Hole was impressed with the work I was able to get done on that expedition. So they hired me again the following summer to work on one of their vessels, the Atlantis, and to document the very famous deep sea submersible Alvin. I'm sure many of you are familiar with Alvin, but if anyone is not, this is the human-occupied submersible. It takes humans to the seafloor, and it's very, very famous in the world of ocean exploration and deep sea science and research. It helped to discover hydrothermal vents back in the 1970s and helped to discover the Titanic in the 80s. And this expedition was particularly exciting because Alvin had just been rated to a new depth rating, so it could now go deeper than it had ever gone before. So every day we were making history during this expedition. Phenomenal job for me to be able to document this. And one of the things that I found most fascinating about how the Alvin program works is they put people in the water. So you've got humans in the sub, and then every time the sub gets deployed off the ship or is brought back on the ship, people are in the water with it. They call them the Alvin swimmers. So I thought this was just a really fascinating part of how this operation works. And it was something I'd never seen before. I'd worked with AUVs, ROVs, all these other fancy ocean science technologies. I'd never seen people in the water with the equipment like this. So I talked to the captain and was able to get permission to go out with the Alvin swimmers on a recovery of the sub coming up from one of its dives.
500 meters.
Yeah, that's hop in Zodiac.
500 meters.
Wrap this up as was coming from the guests.
Thank you.
Fun.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
And this happened very fast. I thought I was going to have like half an hour. I ended up having like 5 minutes to try to capture this crazy action. So that's just kind of a short taste of what that looked like. I was able to get a couple pretty good photos, pretty good action shots, and I am so glad that I did because these ended up going everywhere. They got picked up by local and national media. They were published on CNN. They were all over social media, just everywhere. So that was one of the first times that I'd seen my little photos get, national and international attention, which was really amazing. This was also, looking back, I think kind of the turning point once I had done these 2 big expeditions with an institution as highly esteemed as Woods Hole. Ever since then, I have gotten pretty consistent expedition work. So after that expedition, just a month later, I was out in Hawaii working with OET and National Geographic on 3 back-to-back expeditions. And then in 2023, I did 5 expeditions on 3 different ships in 4 months. So it was insane. I was in Canada, and then I went directly to Hawaii. And then I went back out to the North Atlantic with Woods Hole again. And then I went back out to Hawaii. And then I was back on Nautilus in the North Pacific. And that was 2023, 2024, 2025. I did about 7 expeditions between those 2 years. It's now gotten to the point where I've done so many that I can't fit them all into one PowerPoint presentation, which is a phenomenal problem to have. I have done over 30 expeditions on 10 different vessels, and I've worked with over a dozen amazing organizations and institutions. And this really is mind-blowing to me, because when I started my freelance career, I had no idea this was possible. I had no idea that all of these organizations would want to work with little me and have me tell their stories. So this is really special and still really surreal. And I also want to point out that the most important one, I could not have done everything that I've done with this incredible career if I didn't have a really solid foundation from being both a student and an employee at UNC. And I'm going to talk more about that in just a second. So in a nutshell, I hope I've made it clear. I hope I've clearly communicated that being an ocean science photographer and videographer is a really cool job, really great gig. I really love it. But this is not the only thing that I've done over the past 8 years of my freelance career. I have had to develop a lot of other skills that I didn't anticipate, that I did not, think I would need. One of them has been getting interviewed on podcasts. It turns out when you have a job like mine, a lot of people want to hear your story, want to hear my insights and crazy stories from being out at sea and what it's like to be a freelancer and to do all these things. I've also done more and more public speaking gigs, and one of the most notable ones was at Science Talk in Portland, Oregon, back in April of 2022. This was with the Association of Science Communicators, which I know many people in this room are familiar with. I gave just a really short, sweet talk about lessons I'd learned from freelancing. At this point, I'd been freelancing for 4 years and had some insights and experiences and knowledge to share. And the organizers of the conference enjoyed my talk so much. They said, "Hey, Marley, how do you feel about maybe coming up with and designing an online course? We offer these courses a couple times a year for our community, and we think you'd be really good at, teaching some of this stuff." I had never developed a curriculum before. I'd never organized an online course. But as y'all can probably guess at this point, I said yes, and I just figured it out. And I was able to run this course for ASC 3 or 4 different times. It went really well. I learned a lot about, how to share knowledge effectively, how to help people who are interested in pursuing a similar career path. And along the same lines, I also just started my own little mentorship program. I get lots and lots of emails, especially from students or folks who have just graduated, people who are early in their careers, just wanting advice and insight and perspective. So that was pretty natural. And then that also naturally led into starting a mentorship program for the Association of Science Communicators. And we're now entering our 3rd year of this program. And I'm really proud of it and really excited to keep developing that. And then all of these mentorship and teaching opportunities have just created other opportunities, just one of which was leading an incredible ocean science storytelling workshop in Palau. So I got to fly all the way out to Palau and work with these young professionals and help equip them with photo and video and just different storytelling skill sets. And on the note of skill sets, I want to talk briefly about this. This is what I started with. When I graduated from journalism school and started working at UNC, this was what I had. Now, over a decade later, I have all these other skills, many of which I never could have imagined I would be gaining. And I want to dig into this for just a second because I think it's really important, especially for young folks, especially for anybody who's just, recently graduated or still trying to figure out their career path. Having a solid foundation makes a huge difference. I really can't reiterate that enough. I think I had such a good foundation to build all of these other crazy skills on top of. And this foundation came directly from the School of Journalism and my experiences there, and then my experiences in my first 2 jobs at UNC, both for the College of Arts and Sciences and for UNC Research. And I think it's also important to note that this section, this building that's going to keep expanding. That's going to keep growing, not just for me, but for all of us. Jobs, careers are shifting and changing. We all have to learn new technologies and new ways of doing things. So I think having this mindset of what are your foundational skills and then what skills are you building can be really, really helpful. And then finally, last little piece of advice, insight is professional connections have been a huge part of my career path and my success, especially as a freelancer. So I have met lots of amazing people over the years, and I have tried to maintain those connections as much as possible. For example, I started this presentation by talking about working in a field camp in Antarctica, very crazy experience. The reason I got invited to join that expedition was this guy. This is Andy Klesch. He is an engineer at NASA, and I sailed with him on the Alvin expedition back in 2022. We stayed in touch a little bit. We have some colleagues in common. And when his team was looking for a photographer, videographer to join their expedition to Antarctica just a few months ago, my name was at the top of Andy's list. So that's just one example. There are many, many others. Just one more that I'll highlight today is my dear friend and colleague, Alyssa. As Alyssa said, it's been almost a decade since we last officially worked together. But I am so grateful to still be in touch with Alyssa. And I think it's another good example of how and why you should maintain professional connections and friendships. That's literally the reason I am here with all of you today. And I really appreciate y'all being here and listening to my story. And I would love to take any questions you have. Thank you so much.
Please tell me that some camera system is sponsoring you and giving you equipment. How does that work out? Is that
Oh man, I wish. Yeah, no, I don't.
Light Stalkers or
I
something?
don't have any sponsorships. I do, when people ask about equipment, I'm a very loyal fan of Canon, if anyone has connections at Canon. But then I also use DJI drones and a DJI Steadicam and little stuff. I'm also, compared to other professional photographers, I'm not a gearhead. I don't bring Pelican cases full of gear. I don't like to travel that way. I'd rather go light and fast and have a backpack. So that for this, obviously the style of work I do, that tends to work better for me.
Connected.
Yeah, go ahead.
Follow-up question on that, because some of the night shots on the boats are incredible. And I was wondering, like, is that lighting, things you staged, or are you just utilizing whatever's on the ship in order to get the shots?
Yeah, let me see if I can do it. There's this one shot that I showed y'all. Hold on. Do it.
Working on.
Yeah, that back deck photo.
Yeah, yes, that one.
This is insane.
Yeah.
Colors. This also was published in like the Woods Hole calendar and stuff. I love this photo. So I am just using natural light here. The light on his face is coming from, so obviously it's just after sunset, it's dusk, and that's why the sky is all purple. And then there's big bright deck spotlights that are lighting him up and lighting up this crazy mooring rigging that we've been pulling up off the seafloor. So yeah, that is just natural lighting. I don't have the capacity to travel with a light kit,
Right, you're just one person.
Yeah, so find the light wherever it is. That's my advice.
Oh, no, go on.
I was gonna ask, this might be obvious, but did you try different settings and stuff before you got this image?
Yeah, I mean, I took, like I always do, I took probably a dozen different variations of this shot. The lighting was pretty much the same for each of them. I just thought his expression in this one was the best, so. Yeah, go ahead.
How do I put this? What are you doing with all the video and the photos you're documenting? Are these expeditions? Are you putting them together, or you're just?
There's just this huge bag of this is my life's work. I'm sorry.
I'm hiring you to put together videos for social media, or you're saying, here's all the video, you do what you want, or I guess each one is
different. Yeah. So in my like the expeditions I've done with Woods Hole, I would produce, I would do a bunch of filming, film all the operations stuff, film interviews with scientists, and then I would edit together usually a 3 or 4 minute, expedition overview video. All of those are, I don't usually show those during presentations like this because it just takes too long, but those are on the video page of my website. And yeah, so I edit together videos that then they put on their websites, they share on social media. Occasionally things get picked up by bigger media outlets. I did have some photos published in the New York Times for the first time a year ago, which was really exciting. That doesn't happen every day, but when it does, it's very cool. So yeah, the institutions and organizations that I work for, they pay me a nice big day rate, and then they own the images that I take.
That's what.
And a lot of photographers don't like that deal. I don't mind it. I can still use, like, this photo is on the site just as part of my portfolio, and that's fine. I cannot sell this video, or I cannot sell this photo and make money off of it because it is owned by Woods Hole. Does that make sense?
So as you're going to them, you're saying, hey, they approach you, would you document this? Sure, I can also produce this, or again, it's kind of whatever they're looking.
Yeah, I mean, I write up kind of a proposal of statement of work sort of thing. I can do underwater stuff. I can do drone stuff. Some institutions have specific goals about what they want. Some are just like, yeah, we trust you, go be creative. So there's a hand in the back first. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, you. Yeah.
Great talk. I had a question regarding your approach. All of these expeditions, I'm sure, are extremely well planned and way in advance. So you kind of know what you're getting into and what they would like you to document. But how much of it is spontaneity? Do you miss it on the job, or do you infuse, your style in the photography? How do you strike that balance, and which one do you prefer?
Yeah, that's a great question. There is a ton of, usually years of planning that goes into each of these expeditions. But plans get messed up constantly. People think, okay, we're going to do this, and then we're going to do this, and you're on a ship in the middle of the ocean, and things will change, 1,000 times. So being really adaptable and flexible is a really, really important part of it. And yeah, I mean, that applies to the photos I'm taking and the videos I'm filming. Like, it could be something as simple as, okay, I'm going to sit down with the chief scientist and film an interview about the research objectives for this expedition. And that's the plan for the afternoon. And then suddenly the weather goes to hell and the chief scientist is seasick. And it's like, well, now I can't film that. I'm going to do something else, So you constantly have to shift and adapt and figure out, how you're going to do things. I mean, I don't really think of it from a creative perspective of like, oh, what do I feel like today? It's really like, what can I get done based on the conditions that we're working in, does that answer your question?
It does, yes.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah, as you become even more well-known and your portfolio increases, are you thinking about either getting an agent or a lawyer to help you retain copyright and future ownership of some of the work you do?
I have not considered that at this point. I don't know, thinking about the future is really hard. My whole mantra is like, I'm just going to figure it out as I go, which is what I've been doing. I love doing photography and video, but I don't necessarily want to do just photography video forever. When people ask about like, what's my big creative goal, I don't really want to make a documentary film. I don't want to have my photos published in a million places. I really just want to write a book about what it's like to go out to sea and do these things. So, yeah, I mean, that's probably a good idea. I probably should get a lawyer, but I don't know. Things like that are pretty expensive, and being, just a single individual self-employed person, that hasn't been high on the priority list at this point. I'm also fortunate. I have good working relationships with all of these institutions. I haven't needed a lawyer at this point. So yeah, I don't know. I'll think about it, but that's, as of right now, not super high on the list. So we'll see. Yes.
We have 4 questions in the chat.
Oh, great. Yeah.
Kick some of those off. How do you deal with equipment failure in such remote places?
Yeah.
Yeah, that is Oh, sorry, hold on. I just wanted to get to our last slide. So we have on pretty much all the ships that I work on, like our own personal Home Depot, with just as many different cords, batteries, replacement parts, because the reality is when you're out in the middle of the ocean and something breaks, can you just put it on the last slide with my website, just in case people want to get in touch? So we bring as many backups as possible. I bring, backup batteries, backup memory cards, backup camera. But yeah, I mean, if something completely breaks and you don't have a backup, you are kind of just out of luck. But we've learned from our mistakes and we bring as many backups. And I've also been really amazed with how my shipmates can fix things and MacGyver things, too. Other questions?
Someone else asked, I know you mentioned some of the skills you spent to be able to get physically ready for these kinds of expeditions. How did you go about skilling up in those ways? Did you pay for those things out of pocket?
It's a great question. Yeah. So one of the incredible things about working at UNC during that time, and having an amazing boss, Layla Dowdy, was a really, really huge advocate, wonderful supervisor. And she and I finagled a way for UNC to pay for my scuba diving certification. And I was able to use work time to go to the beach and get certified to scuba dive, which is very expensive. It's prohibitively expensive for a lot of people. I also kind of learned from scientists I was working with how to fly drones. But then I did pay for some things out of pocket. The rock climbing I started doing just on my own. Work wasn't going to pay for that. The mountaineering course I did out in the Cascades, I paid for that out of pocket. So it was a little bit of a mix. I also took, I didn't have time to include all this in the presentation, but I also did more professional development stuff while I was at UNC, going to science writing workshops, going to conferences, really trying to take advantage of all of those perks when you're a full-time employee. Now that I'm full-time freelance, I pay for everything out of pocket, but it is a business expense write-off. So I do have an accountant, and that's money I spend all year is on my accountant. She keeps me doing well on that front. So good question. Other questions?
I have this question too, but how much is your work documentary versus asking people to do things more slowly or over and over again? I'm sure there's a mix going on, but I'm curious how you approach making sure you get the shot when things are only happening once.
Fortunately, in the world of ocean science, things tend to happen repeatedly, like a lot of science. It's we're doing the same, we're deploying this instrumentation and then we're bringing it back on board and then we're putting it over the side again and then we're bringing it back on board. The scientists in the room are like, times 100, times 200. Yeah. So very often the action is happening over and over again. And not only can I get exactly the shot I want, I can get it from like 10 or 12 different angles and different times of day and different lighting. I had one expedition where it was just water sampling for 3 weeks straight. So I got really creative on how to make that look exciting. But yeah, no, I do occasionally, and I have to hand it to the people I work with. They're very patient and very kind and really good at putting up with me shoving a camera in their face. Like on the Ocean Twilight Zone expedition where all the people were holding the creatures in their hands. Obviously that was a posed photo. They, bring these things out of the cot end. And then I say, hey, can you hold that for just a second? Let me, and it takes 10 seconds for them to turn around, hold the thing, get the light right. Okay, put it back, do your thing, keep going. I try to, not get in the way of the process. It's usually just, hey, can you turn towards me real quick? Snap. Okay, continue doing what you're doing. So really trying to just be in the flow of all the science operations without making people stop what they're doing, if that makes sense. Was there one more question from the chat and then I'll get you? Yeah.
If you're willing to share, what's the range of what expedition organizers pay for a photographer, videographer to come on board?
Yeah, when I first started, I was getting extremely underpaid, $300 a day. And now my day rate is between $500 to $650. So typically I make depending on the length of the expedition, it's usually between 10 and 20 grand per expedition. and I do a couple each year. So yeah, I try to be really transparent about pricing and those sorts of figures because I just think that a lot of people are curious about that. I had one person ask me one time, so do you get paid to do this? Yes, I wouldn't do it if I wasn't getting paid. Yeah, go ahead, sorry.
Question about the savviness of your employers in terms of what product they're looking for. You said, for example, sometimes you just hand over everything, which makes your life pretty easy, the script or edit. But are there other times where you do the 4-minute overview video and then you do breakouts of each scientist, that sort of thing? And how much do you charge by the hour on those, or how do you work on that?
Yeah, so when I'm on the ship, I get paid the day rate, and that can sometimes include editing while I'm at sea. If like with the Antarctica project, I was just filming and photographing every day we were down there, and then I did all the editing and post-production after we got back. So that was just a separate contract. I had the contract for my time in Antarctica and then another contract for doing all the editing afterwards.
Different rate.
Yes, yeah. Different rate, and then more like an hourly rate, hourly editing rate instead of a day rate. And yeah, it really runs the gamut. Some institutions have like a full script of like scripted out narrative of what they want, which I think is a little ridiculous because again, things are so unpredictable out there. And then some, like my boss at Woods Hole, he really trusts me. He's like, go get whatever you can get. It'll be awesome. So it really depends on who I'm working for. Some people are control freaks, some people aren't. I'm sure we've all experienced that in different work environments. It's not just the expedition world. So yeah, great questions, phenomenal questions.
I was gonna ask like either scariest moment or most like awesome like thing you can describe, even if you didn't capture it, like
yeah,
like a moment or something that you can
man.
in.
Yeah. I mean, I'll tell you the craziest thing I've ever seen at sea. And this is a little heavy. We all can handle it because it's just the real world and it's very different to see it in person and not on the news. It wasn't an animal. It wasn't a crazy weather thing. When I was in the Caribbean working on the Alvin expedition, we saw a raft that had 4 men on it fleeing Cuba. And they had run out of food and they had run out of water. And if we had not picked them up and rescued them, they would have died. This is one of the things I want to write about in the book I'm going to write one day. I have seen some shit out in the middle of the ocean. It is crazy. And that was a really, yeah, that one was just, I'll never forget it. I like have chills thinking about it. I just, yeah, you've never seen human desperation and suffering until you see it in person like that in the middle of the ocean.
How long have they been without any sustenance?
They had been without water for a day. And the crazy thing about that was we were in the Caribbean halfway between basically halfway between Puerto Rico and Florida. We were in a major shipping lane. 30 other ships had passed them and refused to pick them up. And then our captain was like, oh no, we're not letting these guys die. I mean, we had to just hand them over to the US Coast Guard. And I'm sure they got deported back to Cuba, but at least they didn't die a very slow and horrible death. So yeah, they were okay. They were a little dehydrated and very hungry, but we got them lots of fluid and foods, and they were on our ship for about 24 hours. So yeah,
That was the cheeriest moment.
well, one time I ran out of air when I was scuba diving, but I stayed calm and didn't panic, and that turned out to be okay. That was when I was in the Galapagos, right after I'd gotten certified to scuba dive. Yeah, you shouldn't go diving in the Galapagos if you're a brand new diver. So yeah, but that was, we were 60 feet down. I was really low on air, and I just communicated with the lead diver that I was low on air, and we just watched it go down and down and down. And then he handed me his buddy breathing, and I breathed off of his tank for the remainder of the dive, and we were able to get back up fine. It sounds really dramatic. I ran out of air while I was scuba diving, but got through it just fine. So yeah, there are all kinds of crazy moments, all kinds of wild, dramatic stories. Just really want to put them all in a book at some point, because I think that's just, I don't know, it's just a whole world of wild things out there. Yes.
Have you thought about branching out beyond scientific expeditions?
I have, and I've thought about trying to not just work on ships. I would love to document science in the middle of the desert. This most recent project in Antarctica was one of the first times that I've been on land and not documenting an expedition at sea in many years. So that was really cool to like be in a field camp, and I would love to do more work like that. I think I'll stick with science. I dabbled in doing some like adventure photography, video stuff when I first started. I documented a couple like ultra marathon hardcore runners in the mountains and that sort of thing, which is fine. But I don't know. I really like working alongside scientists and knowing that our work is somewhat contributing to the better understanding of our planet and the conservation of it and those sorts of things. So yeah, I think I would love to work with more types of scientists. The problem is when you work on ships and do a lot of work in the oceanography world, then you just keep getting recommended for jobs like that, which is a great problem to have. And it's why I've done so many ocean expeditions. But I would also, yeah, I'd love to work in the mountains or in the desert or in the rainforest or anywhere else. So if anybody knows anybody looking for an expedition photographer or doing something like that.
Putting those out.
Okay. Yeah.
Crazy. A lot of money in that.
Yeah.
And the scientists, I mean, whether you think it's evil or not, it's like oil money.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But
any other questions? I know we've run over by a few minutes, but we did start a few minutes late. Yeah.
What was it? I feel like a big part of communications that I haven't really talked to anyone about yet is the emotional, as you said, the emotional like experiences you have and how you navigate those as you're still doing your work. I was at Embari for a bit, and I'm actually texting Susan now because I'm taking a picture of your slide. One of the things I learned there was like when you go on expeditions, you're in this confined space with a certain set of humans for a long period of time, limited food. Sometimes you're waking up at 4 a.m. to haul up the nets. It can be a very stressful environment. And you have to still do your job while navigating the human part of like emotions and maybe stress and drama and stuff. And the things that you talked about, like rescuing refugees. So I wanted to ask, how do you navigate experiencing those emotions while still doing your job? And then I don't know if there's any processing you have to do afterwards, or maybe I'm making it out to be more than it actually is.
That's exactly why I want to write a book. Everything you just said. It is very complicated. It is, it's also one of my favorite parts. I mean, people are obsessed with what's the coolest place you've been, what's the coolest thing you've seen. It must be Antarctica, it must be the whales. People want the big charismatic megafauna stuff. I think the most fascinating part of any expedition I join is the people and the social dynamics of how people put up with each other in that confined environment and what that looks like. And yeah, some of my shipmates are some of my dearest friends, and some of my shipmates are people that I'd really rather not be stuck on a boat with. But I have developed a high degree of patience and empathy and I don't know. I mean, the whole experience, it is very challenging. There are days where you want to just kind of like hide from everyone on the boat, and that's hard to do. But I don't know. I think it really teaches you a lot about human nature and what we're capable of, and just how to be as like kind and understanding as possible. Like tough things happen while we're at sea. In my very first Antarctica expedition, one of our marine technicians, her father passed away while we were down there, and she wasn't able to get home and be with her family until 6 weeks later. And that happens, so those are, just real world things that are kind of, we all deal with stuff like that all the time. It's just like heightened and elevated when you're in such an extreme environment. But it just means that being kind and compassionate is that much more important. So try to keep that at the forefront. And I also keep a daily log at sea. So it's not really, I guess you could call it like a journal, but it's really just, I make notes about conversations I had with people or something that went wrong, but then we fixed it, or just, what the notable things of the day were. hoping to use part of that again to write a book to kind of tell a more cohesive story about what this life is like. Because you're right, it is absolutely wild and hard to explain to people who haven't experienced it. So.
Thank you. I cannot wait to read this book.
Oh, thank you. I need the motivation to sit down and write it. So thank you. Yeah.
Well, if you're looking for a title for the book, I'd write out a very well scuba diving would be. You touched on the scariest thing, one of the coolest things. What's the image or what's the experience that you keep coming back to and say, wow, this is why I do this?
It's so hard. Yeah, I mean, like the clip I showed you, that first moment of filming something on the seafloor was pretty extraordinary, like being in control of the cameras, getting to do that. Pretty much every day of flying my drone in Antarctica was pretty awesome. Yeah, I mean, the things that really stick out again are the people. So kind of like the wild conversations you have at 4 a.m. when you're looking at a night sky that's unlike anything you've ever seen on land. Seeing the Southern Cross for the first time out in the middle of the ocean, stuff like that. It's a great question. I wish I had like a perfect go-to answer. It's daunting to scroll through the Rolodex of imagery. I don't know. Every time I get on a ship and just have the experience of looking out at the vast ocean, I still can't believe I get paid to do this. It's still, even almost a decade of doing it and 30 expeditions and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of days at sea. It doesn't get old. It's still a very magical thing. So. Yeah. All right. That's great. Thank you all so much for coming. Please get in touch if you'd like, reach out, email me. I've got a bunch of different stories on my website, on my blog, if you want to read more about what it's like to spend 2 weeks in quarantine or what it's like I have a bunch of writing about my expeditions. And I'll hang out for a few minutes. If anybody wants to ask more questions or chat for a minute, I will be up here. Thank